Okay. 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 All righty. Let's get this thing going. Before we get started, I just want to just remind everybody about the etiquette for these virtual thesis defenses. If the audience everybody could please keep their things muted during the defense, and don't attempt to turn your video on or share your screen during the talk. Appreciate it. Also, there will be an opportunity for the audience to ask Amber questions live at the end of the defense. Once she's finished her talk, you can raise your hand using the Zoom feature to notify her that you'd like to ask a question. And if you don't know where it is, it's located at under the Participants tab at the top of the Zoom video. So with that taken care of, I want to introduce Amber Reichert, who will be giving her thesis defense. She's been a part of the Pacific Shark Research Center for the past 6.5 years, and I'm really, really happy, proud to see she's finishing up here. And without saying any more, Amber, go ahead and let her roll.
Thanks, Dave. But one semester was off, so I like to classify myself as just being a 6th-year student. But anyway, thank you all for being here and joining me virtually. I know this isn't the ideal way that all of us recently, are wanting to defend, but however, this is really nice, and that all my family and friends from out of state and out of region, can all come and check into what I've been up to these past several years. I'll do this safely. So with that, I would like to share with you today my research on the habitat associations of cat shark egg cases, Chondrichthyes Pentanchidae, off the U.S. Pacific coast. Why is this not working? Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so brief outline. I'll start off with a general background about habitat selection, get a little bit into egg cases and nursery, and a general introduction onto my study species, followed by broken into 2 sections, each with their own respective study questions, methods, and results. Followed by that will be discussion and conclusion. So let's dive right in. Defined by Montgomery and Roloff, 2017, it's the act of choosing the combination of available abiotic and biotic elements for the purpose of fulfilling the life history event of the organism. In other words, habitat selection is choosing an environment that's best suited for the survival of an organism, and these requirements can change with things such as life stage. So, what factors are influencing habitat selection? Things such as space availability, access to food and water sources, predator avoidance, shelter from climatic extremes, nesting sites, and spawning sites. And what we do know about habitat selection and associations, far less is understood about marine species, and this is specifically true for the deep sea. Habitat selection in the deep sea is poorly understood. This is in part due to it being the largest environment on the Earth and the least studied, and there are a lot of inherent challenges in doing so, so that is all understandable. In 2000, we're focusing on looking at groundfish habitat, and they did so focusing on the geological and physical seafloor structure. Research such as these are important by looking at species-specific habitat association. This information is incredibly valuable. The designation of regions such as a fish habitat. Essential fish habitat, or EFH, as Congress in the 1996 amended Magnuson-Stevens Act, are those waters and substrate necessary to fish for spawning, breeding, feeding, or growth to maturity. And nursery habitats are rather important, and they do meet these EF qualifications. Structure-forming marine invertebrates, or SFMI, are things as corals or sponge communities, These provide attachment surfaces, refuge from predators, spawning or reproduction, and feeding locations for a variety of marine. Certain regions of SFMI, such as corals within the Gulf of Mexico, have been classified as deep water and deep sea cold water, coral, and sponge SFMI communities have often been considered facultative or obligate in that they may or may not be fully essential for the survival of an organism's life. However, we do know that they have strong faunal associations. More evidence is required in order to classify certain SFMI regions as EFH. On several occasions, there have been examples of Catshark cases attached to sessile megafauna, such as SFMI. Here are two examples. On the left-hand side, Etnoyer and Warrenchuk, 2007, Catshark A cases of an unidentified species. These were on Gorgonian communities within the Gulf of Mexico. And on the right-hand side, Trude et al. In 2011, they observed a case of Galeus melostomus, the black-mouthed cat shark, in these deep-sea tubeworm thickets in the Mediterranean. Nursery habitat is largely unknown for oviparous or egg-laying species. In 2016, Hoff was examining skate nurseries within the Bering Sea, and he was looking at the potential use of more than one nursery. He proposed that they're partitioned into two separate nursery locations, each with their own set of criteria, and that would be an A-case nursery and a juvenile nursery. For my talk, I'll be focusing on A-case nurseries, and criteria he identified are to identify geographic location where eggs are deposited at high densities. Habitat is benthic, and eggs are contacting benthic or stationary materials, i.e. non-mobile and on a large scale. Sites are used over multiple years as egg case nurseries. And post-hatching, the juveniles will identify with habitats other than egg case nursery habitat. So let's dive on in. Deep sea cat sharks of the family Pentanchidae. This is the largest family of extant sharks, comprised of 11 genera and 109 species, making it the most speciose family. My study species both fall into this family, of the genus Aprosteris with 39 valid species, and the genus Parmaturus with 11 valid species. There are a data gap on the life histories, systematics, and distributions of these species. However, with the access to archives, I formulate my questions and work on closing this gap. The brown cat shark, Aprosteris breneus, my first study species, classified Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, as data deficient. These sharks occur along the outer continental shelves to the upper slopes within the eastern Pacific Ocean, ranging in depth from 33 to 1,341 meters, and can be found geographically from southeastern Gulf of Alaska to central Baja California, Mexico. Aprosteris breneus egg cases, there are approximately 52 to 72 millimeters total length. This makes them the California cat shark species. Tendrils are found on both the anterior and posterior ends here. In coloration, they are bright golden yellow in utero and upon initial deposition, and after about a month exposure to seawater, they start to turn a dark brown coloration. File-tail cat shark, Parmaturus xaniaris, this is my second study species, classified as least concerned by the IUCN, which was formerly data deficient. These sharks occur along the outer continental shelves and the upper slope regions within the eastern Pacific Ocean, ranging in depth from 1,819 meters, and geographically can be found from Oregon down to the Gulf of California. Parmaturus xaniaris egg cases, approximately 70 to 110 millimeters total length. Tendrils are found on both the anterior and posterior ends, similarly to Aprosteris breneus. They have the presence of anterior horns here, a filament that's extending off of this lateral edge. Coloration, similarly, they are golden yellow in utero and they turn dark brown after about a month of exposure to seawater. Lastly, they have a thick lateral flange or keel, which is the outside edge of the egg case here. And this photo here depicts very well what the egg case would look like after long exposure. Abranius and Pizianius egg cases were previously identified by Fleming in 2005 within the, and she saw these rocky substrates and invertebrates. However, specific habitat associations looking at attachment, substrate, associated fauna, or depth were not examined. In this section, I will be addressing the questions: is there an association between attachment substrate type and egg case occurrence for Abranius and Pizianius? And do Abranius and Pizianius differentially utilize SFMI habitats as oviposition locations? My study system spanned the greater Monterey Bay to Carmel Bay region, approximately 36.3 to 37 degrees north latitude. The benthic habitat within Monterey Bay includes regions of rock, such as reefs, submarine canyons, or seamounts, as well as unconsolidated stretches of mud, sand, or gravel. The canyon systems within my study region are the geologically most important, the Monterey Canyon being the largest, with the Carmel Canyon to the south and Soquel and Cabrillo Canyons to the north. And these regions are comprised of large granite and sedimentary rock outcrops surrounded by mud. Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, or MBARI, were my first data collection source. These data were used to examine habitat associations of egg cases. I was able to look at 84 remotely operated vehicle, or ROV surveys. These were based on positive occurrence annotations within the MBARI database. These surveys I looked at ranged in depth from 100 to 850 meters between the years 1989 and 2017. All surveys I looked at were within the Monterey Bay area. And due to opportunistic data collection, these data were limited to presence-only information as well as qualitative evaluation. The Southwest Fisheries Science Center Fisheries Ecology Division, or SWFSC, FED, which I will from here on out just be abbreviating to SWFSC. They had manned submersible dives. These were used with the MBARI data in order to examine egg case habitat associations. 89 manned submersible transects from the submersible delta, seen here on the left-hand side, were reviewed. These surveys ranged in depth from 30 to 365 meters between the years 1992 to 2009, and all transects were conducted within the Monterey Bay area. Each transect had a width of 2 meters, was run at 1.5 knots for 15 meters, and all transects were limited to rockier habitats within the study region. Many hours were spent reviewing video, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Many, my eyes can attest to that. And sure, it doesn't look like it's much fun, and yes, it is incredibly tedious, but you get to see a lot of interesting things and stuff that you wouldn't get to otherwise. And it also just has a bunch of information just being selected. This photo depicts a very clear resolution. This is taken from one of the high definition cameras aboard the manned submersible. However, ideally all video resolution would look like this, but due to data source collection, the years the data were collected, there was a variation in resolution. A lot of the data I were looking at looked like where my finger is pointing to an egg case on that granite outcrop. For data collection, only positive species level identifications were used. Trained lasers, seen in the photo on the top right there, were used for total length estimation. Egg cases were identified to species using coloration, in that newly deposited egg cases are bright yellow and they have little to no fouling. Total length, lateral keel or flange width, as well as the presence or absence of tendrils. Additional data collected were frequency, either individual egg case counts or eggs within a bundle. A bundle is classified as 2 or more egg cases attached together on the same attachment substrate. Condition, attachment substrate, age, position, associated faunal groups for both fishes and invertebrates. To be associated, a fish must be within 1 total length away from the egg cases, and to be an associated invertebrate, you have to be in contact with the egg case. CTD, or conductivity, temperature, and depth data, as well as geographic coordinates. For only the manned submersible dives, seafloor was classified following Green et al. 1999's protocol. Within my survey regions, they were comprised of cobble, rock, and mud or silt. Cobble and rock both being of hard induration, where silt or soft. These habitats were for the habitat type, hard, soft, and mixed, where hard is an area swept where it's greater than 7% of the area as hard sediment. Soft is greater than or equal to 67% of the area swept being soft sediment, and mixed is less than 67% of the area swept being rock and less than 67% of the area swept being soft. I further partitioned the mixed categories into 2. Hard mixed being primarily hard substrate, and soft mixed being of the mixed category with primarily soft substrate. For statistical analyses, a subset of the SWFSC manned submersible transects were randomly selected. This was done to evaluate habitat preferences. Egg case observations were pooled across transects to get relative proportions of eggs per habitat type. Chi-square tested independent case observations were independent of habitat, and this was done using contingency tables. Habitat preferences were analyzed for each species independently. This was done using a 2x2 contingency table, and this was looking at the 4 habitat types: hard, hard mixed, soft, and soft mixed. Habitat depth groups choose independently as well, and this was done using 4x4 contingency tables with the same 4 habitat types, in addition to the depth bins, each within 50-meter intervals from 100 to 149 meters, 150 to 199 meters, 200 to 249 meters, and 250 to 300 meters. Habitat and attachment substrate groupings were analyzed. This was done only for Parmaturus saniers, as there was too low of a sample size for Apisturus brennius. The habitat types observed were hard and hard mixed, with the substrate types barren, essentially brock in that there is no coral or sponge attached, followed by coral and sponges. Concurrent with the contingency table analyses, mainly selection indices were run. This was done using the proportion of egg cases found in each habitat, as well as the habitat patch area as a proportion of the total available habitat area. These are done in order to evaluate the relative magnitude of a habitat association. And an electivity index is calculated for each habitat, and this can range anywhere from used exclusively to totally avoided. So what did we find? Our qualitative observations indicated that overall more P. xaniers egg cases were observed between data sources than A. brennius egg cases. Overall, the Mbari ROV data observed egg cases at deeper depths. This is due to depth limitations in the manned submersible. Majority of egg cases for both species were observed from the manned submersible transects. And lastly, there was little variation between salinity and temperature among data sources, but any variation could be attributed to the differences in how data was collected. When looking at oviposition site counts among attached substrate, sponges were the overwhelming majority, and this was true for sponges of all morphologies, ranging from barrel, nipple, foliose, branching, encrusting, horizontal and vertical shelf, tube, or vase sponges. Of these, foliose and horizontal shelf sponges were the most frequented attachment substrate. Followed by this, Catshark egg cases, new Catshark egg cases were commonly seen attached to older bundles. Soft substrate egg cases were either seen individually or in piles, and egg cases were observed on corals, predominant as well as desmophyllum. The remaining groups, amphipod tubes, crinoids, fishing gear, and other, which comprised rarely used attachment substrate, all had few oviposition counts. When looking at faunal associations, sponges were the dominant for both species. This was followed by sea stars, corals, and fishes. It shows this photo here as it shows the associated fauna quite clearly. There are an abundance of sponges all over these rock walls here, patches of corals, and many predatory sea stars up and down these bundles. The sea stars seen in this picture, Rathbanaster californicus, and then Stylosarius ferreri, the fish-eating star. And they were likely just having a buffet up and down here. Fishes were often observed around egg cases. These were primarily rock fishes with the occasional lingcod. These photos here, a collection that I liked of the other category. This ranged anywhere from a gastropod to a spot prawn, urchin, anemone. My personal favorite in the center there, a giant Pacific octopus, and you can a bundle of egg cases right off of the rock. Due to a variation in video resolution, as well as the small size of egg cases, assessing predation damage was difficult. We do know that gastropods, as seen on the image on the left-hand side, prey upon egg cases and leave what are called boreholes, as you can see in the image on the right-hand side. And with these, this knowledge and the observations of the abundance of sea stars, as well as that octopus, it's likely that predation is occurring more commonly. When looking at the subsampled oviposition site attachment substrates, rock and Catshark egg cases were the two primary. And this is interesting in that the majority of attachment substrates used here were not structure-forming marine invertebrates. However, these were followed by sponges and corals. When looking at egg case density per available habitat, significant habitat associations were found independently for both species. Chi-square post hoc tests of independence were run, and significant associations were found for both species. The category hard mixed was the primary attachment substrate for both species, whereas hard substrate was the secondary habitat type for A. brunnius, and soft mixed was the secondary habitat type used for P. xaniurus, which I thought was an interesting result. Significant depth and habitat associations were found for A. brunnius. 3 of the possible 16 habitat depth groups had selectivity indices greater than random. Post hoc chi-square independence tests found that all 3 of these had significant associations. And these results here are suggestive that there's differential use of high induration habitats between 100 and 199 meters depth. For P. xaniurus, significant depth and habitat associations were also found. 5 out of the 16 possible habitat depth groupings had selectivity indices greater than random. Upon a chi-square post hoc independence test, 4 of these 5 were shown to have significant associations. And these results here are suggestive that differential use of high induration habitat was occurring, and these are between the depths of 150 to 249 meters. And when there were significant habitat and substrate attachment associations were found for P. xaniurus. Overall, barren substrate had the largest number of egg cases. However, only the hard mixed and sponge grouping had a selectivity indices greater than random. However, this relationship was shown to not have a significant, it was not a significant association. Sponges, rocks, and Catshark egg cases were found to be important attachment substrates. Sponges were more often associated with egg cases than with corals. Both species utilized high induration substrate. And Abranius egg cases occurred more often at shallower depths than P. xaniurus egg cases. That, I'll take a brief intermission and a sip of water while you enjoy this lovely photo. Moving right along. In section 2, are there regions where geographic or environmental features are of differential importance, Abranius and P. xaniurus oviposition, as well as what are the influential drivers of oviposition sites? In order to do so, I employed maximum entropy modeling, or MaxEnt. This is a machine learning technique where distribution can be predicted from a set of presence-only data. I used MaxEnt version 3.4.1, and this modeling is points to all available environmental variables within a defined study region. This example I'm about to show you is of predicting sloths in South America. This is from Phillips et al. 2006. The main point of this slide is to walk you through the inputs and outputs of the program. And initially, you will need presence points as well as environmental features, also known as environmental rasters. Presence and test data, or presence data are split into test and training data, with 25% of the presence in test data, and this is used for model validation, where the training data and environmental features are plugged into MaxEnt, and the algorithm will spit out several figures and tables, which I will be walking you through from left to right. Initially, you will get a habitat suitability index model such as these. This is on a logarithmic scale, ranging from red to blue, red indicating a high likelihood of finding sloths, whereas the blue indicates a low likelihood. This map can be post-processed in ArcGIS. This is done to help with resolution and make it easier to identify regions of high and low likelihood. From there, area under the receiving operator curve, or AUC plots, are given, and for the rest of or if you can't fully read the axes, the main importance here is that I'm just showing you what the outputs are. So the AUC, this is interpreted as a probability that randomly chosen presence is greater than a random background point. The AUC here is provided for both test and training data. And presence data, your test and training data seen on these red and blue lines, they will be nearly identical. And we're focused here on the test AUC, excuse me. And this measures the capability of model predictions to differentiate observed presences and absences for the test data. Next, MaxEnt will produce a table, and this is a % contribution for each environmental variable. Followed by this are response curves. Response curves are produced for each environmental variable. This is done to illustrate the relationship of predicted probability of occurrence. And on the y-axis here is the logistic output, or the probability of a presence, whereas on the x-axis is whatever environmental variable is being looked at. And as you can see from the graph, the environmental variable increases in quantity, so does the likelihood of finding a sloth. Jackknife sampling, resampling analyses were used, and this was done in order to further evaluate the strength of each predictor variable from the output % contribution table. And lastly, MaxEnt will give a value called the gain. And gain is a measure of goodness of fit. It indicates how closely the model is concentrated around present samples. And the closer the distribution, a uniform distribution, the gain would be closer to 0. and this increases as the model is more distributed. This diagram here I will be walking you through, adapted from Elith et al. 2011. On the top left are the presence points, which are locations where cases were observed. And on the bottom left, these are points, and these are locations within the specified study region where presence has not been identified. Two probability densities have to be calculated in order to obtain a species potential distribution. To do so, presence points and background points are both run through the data. Here are environmental variables we're looking at are rugosity and slope. Densities. The probability density of presence points characterizes where the species has been found, whereas the probability density of background points characterizes the available environment within the study region. Maxent then takes the ratio between these two densities, and this gives the environmental suitability for species presence for each point within the defined study region. So, seems pretty straightforward, right? Not exactly. To my fair share of errors, a lot of troubleshooting here. This, comes with the territory, learning a new modeling technique, interacting with the new graphical user interface, etc. It is really important when you're importing your data into Maxent that both presence points and your environmental rasters are both within the same spatial coordinates and spatial coordinates as well as And I had my trusty cat, Andy, here. He helped calm me down in times of trouble and as I was working through my Maxent modeling issues. Eventually, it all came together. Seen here are my presence endpoint locations. On the left-hand side is the map for A. brunnius, and on the right-hand side for P. xaniers. The green circles are representative of Mbari RV observations, whereas the white circles are representative of the SWFSC manned submersible transect observations. And the bathymetric contour line here is the shelf break at about 200 meters. And each species presence points were run individually in their own model. Environmental predictor variables, or rasters, were provided by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Of these, I selected 15 initially, and this is based on background knowledge of my study species. Non-correlated variables should be removed. This is in order to reduce redundancy within the model and create a more parsimonious model. Once all non-correlated variables were removed, I was left with these 8 variables. Annual bottom current velocity, annual bottom current velocity northness, annual bottom current velocity vertically, depth, latitude, percent gravel, percent mud, and rugosity. And initially, all of these 8 environmental variables were used for both species input models. After each model run, it will give you an output, and it will let you know if a certain environmental variable is dropped, the model can perform better. This was done for both models until the model could no longer improve. To some inherent limitations in using AUC, I employed additional measures of model accuracy, and these were derived from this 2x2 confusion matrix you see on the bottom right corner. Sensitivity is the probability that the model will correctly classify a presence, whereas specificity is the probability that the model will correctly classify an absence. Using these 2 values, you can get the true skill statistic, or TSS. You do this by adding sensitivity to specificity and subtracting 1. TSS is an independent measure of model validity. This takes into account omission or false negative and commission or false positive error rates. Lastly, Cohen's kappa, or the kappa statistic, was used, and this corrects for the accuracy of model fit. It does this using the relative observed model accuracy, as well as the probability of model accuracy expected to occur by random chance. So what did we find here? The final Abranius model, the test AUC indicated that the model was capable of deriving robust predictions of potential suitable habitat. And in the table below, all measures were collectively in agreement and indicate that the model performed well and statistically better than random. Looking at the 6 variables which were used in the final Abranius model, rugosity and depth had the highest % contribution. The remaining 4 contributing little overall to the model, so I will only be focusing on rugosity and depth from here on out. On the top right figure here is the jackknife output plot. The rugosity bar, so we're focusing here on the dark blue bars, and this indicates that rugosity had the highest gain when used in isolation, and by that it is the most effective variable in effectively identifying likelihood of suitable egg-case habitat. Below here is the response curve for rugosity in the bottom right, and this is indicative that with increased rugosity, there is an increased likelihood of finding suitable egg-case habitat. Next, looking at Abranius depth, again, focusing first on the top right, the jackknife output for depth. Again, looking at only the dark blue bar indicates that depth when used in isolation has the second highest gain, and it is the second most effective variable in identifying likelihood of suitable egg-case habitat. Below here is the depth response curve. Between 150 to 400 meters, there was the highest likelihood of finding suitable habitat. This was at about 0.80 with a maximum stability at 300 meters depth. Focusing here now on the Abranius final habitat suitability index map. Again, on the legend here, ranging from reds to blue, high to low likelihood of finding egg case locations, and the bathymetric contour again is the 200-meter shelf break. For Abranius, there was a higher likelihood of finding oviposition sites on the shelf break and upper slope regions of both Monterey and Carmel Canyon, as well as near Carmel and Soquel Canyon heads. There was a moderate likelihood of finding Abranius egg cases along the shelf break of the Cabrillo Canyon, and a low likelihood of finding them along the continental shelves, as well as deeper regions within the canyons. Looking at P-Xaniurus model evaluation, the final model's test AUC indicated that the model was able to derive robust potential suitable habitat as well. And in the table below, all additional measures were in agreement again that the model performs better than it would at random. Looking at the 7 final variables used in the P-Xaniurus model, again, rugosity and depth had the majority % contribution, with the remaining 5 contributing very little to the final model. So again, I will only be focusing on rugosity and depth. This jackknife plot output in the top right here indicated rugosity as the most effective variable when used in isolation in species distribution predictions. And below here is the response curve in the bottom right. And this indicates that there's a higher likelihood of finding egg cases with an increased rugosity. Next, looking at P-Xaniurus depth, the jackknife plot indicated that depth had the second highest gain, therefore making it the second most effective variable in species distribution predictions. And focusing on the bottom right, the response curve for depth, between the depths of 175 to 350 meters, there was the highest probability of suitable habitat, with the maximum likelihood at 0.75 at 300 meters depth. And look at the final, oh my gosh, there again. So the final P-Xaniurus HSI model, the Habitat Suitability Index model, There was a high likelihood of oviposition sites along the upper shelf break of the Monterey and Soquel canyons, a moderate likelihood of finding oviposition sites along Cabrillo Canyon shelf break, as well as in the Carmel Bay, and a low likelihood of finding locations in Carmel and Monterey Canyon heads, or along the continental shelf, as well as deeper within the canyons. To summarize section 2, final Abranius and P. xaniaris oviposition suitability models performed better than random. Rugosity and depth were the most influential environmental features. The shelf break was the most geographically important oviposition location for Abranius and P. xaniaris. Bring it on home, discussion and conclusion. So just to recap, Hoff 2016 to qualify as an oviparous egg case nursery. To 1, identify geographic location where eggs are deposited at high densities. 2, habitat is benthic and eggs are contacting benthic or stationary materials, i.e. non-mobile on a large scale. 3, sites as egg case nurseries. And 4, post-hatching juveniles identify with habitats other than egg case nursery. And all 4 of these criteria were met, solidifying that my study region is in fact an egg case nursery. Large quantities of egg cases of Abranius and P. xaniaris were observed in various locations within the study region. This was more so true for P. xaniaris. All egg cases were observed attached to or contacting benthic or stationary substrate. On the left-hand side here, you can see a few egg cases on the spiral sponge, whereas on the right-hand side, some more cryptic bundles attached to the sponge and rock wall covered by sea stars. It was evident that oviposition sites were used over multiple years, and this was primarily done by looking at freshly deposited egg cases among the darker and older bundles. And in this blurry photo here, there are several pharmaturus swimming around. No sharks were observed near Abranius and P. xaniaris egg case locations. This is suggestive that post-hatching, the juveniles are emigrating to a secondary nursery location. To revisit my study questions, is there an association between attachment substrate type and egg case occurrence for Abranius and P. xaniaris? Yes, there is. Oviposition sites overall appear to be facultative for Abranius and P. xaniaris. This is primarily due to that they were observed both on anthropogenic materials and biogenic surfaces. On the left-hand side here, there's a bundle attached to some fishing line, a couple of egg cases on this pipe on the sea floor. On the right-hand side, there's an egg case lying on this rock. The most frequented attachment substrates were overall sponges, rocks, and Catshark egg cases. This was true for both looking at individual egg case attachment substrate as well as the subsampled oviposition site attachment substrates. This is suggestive that morphology, stability, and induration are all important for oviposition site selection. And soft substrate, this was the second most available habitat within the surveyed regions. And egg cases were seen from our subsamples on soft substrate at similar proportions that they were attached to other Catshark egg cases. Seemingly odd, however, these were mostly seen in dead or decaying piles, or piles that had freshly fallen off of an outcrop or whatever they had initially been attached to. This is suggestive that these Catsharks are not specifically selecting soft habitats for oviposition sites. Question 2. Do Abranius and P. xaniaris differentially utilize SFMI habitats as oviposition locations? No. SFMI are complex structures. This makes them ideal habitats for fishes and species such as fishes and invertebrates. With increased structural complexity, you end up with more egg cases typically. The SFMI in this region increased habitat complexity, and this contributed to both Abranius and P. xaniaris oviposition sites. And on average, there are about 2 to 20 egg cases on either corals or sponges per bundle, and this was true for both. Sponges are often associated with egg cases and used as an attachment substrate than corals. This could be due to the coral biomass within the sampled survey, coral species. However, we do know that corals function as important SFMI structures, and this is known from previous Catshark egg case studies. And additionally, on occasion, egg cases were seen associated with or seemingly encrusting sponges. However, I posit that this is due to the underlying seafloor morphology. Although barren substrate was seen to have higher P-Xaniers egg case observations more so than SFMI, sponges still proved to be important and that they had the highest selectivity index. Additionally, more barren rock was available within the study region. This is also likely due potentially overlooking egg cases amongst patches of biologically rich communities, seen here as an egg case tridal accumulation and makes it a lot harder in order to identify. And there were more concentrated locations P-Xaniers egg cases than Abronius egg cases. This is suggestive that there may be more P-Xaniers oviposition sites within the entire study region. And this can be supported by my observations while concurrently looking at egg cases using MBARI ROV data. I was also looking at the Catshark species, P-Xaniers and Abronius, for part of my thesis, which ended up being cut. Regardless, upon these observations, there are about 7 times more P-Xaniers, Catsharks within the study region than Abronius. Question 3. Are there regions where geographic or environmental features are of differential importance for Abronius and P-Xaniers oviposition? Yes. And what are the influential drivers of oviposition? I will be addressing these final questions together. Rugosity, this feature has the greatest influence on both species. Highly rugose structures are primarily hard. The physical structure of the seafloor was shown to be a key component in understanding benthic preferred oviposition sites. Depth was the second greatest influence on oviposition site selection. This was true for both species. Abronius egg cases were seen more often at shallower depths. From both data sources, Abronius more often were seen less than 200 meters, where P-Xaniers were seen more often and greater than 200 meters. Additionally, with these observations, it revealed a depth range expansion. For Abronius, egg cases can be observed between 87 and 550 meters. And for P-Xaniers, egg cases can be observed between 99 and 524 meters. The shelf break of the submarine canyons were the most geographically important oviposition locations. However, there were higher likelihoods of finding Abronius egg cases towards canyon heads, more so than P-Xaniers. Based on these observations from my study, I'd like to propose upper canyon, slope, and shelf break regions be classified as EFH within my study region. This would be regions such as this. And throughout the canyon system, specifically the Monterey Canyon due to its size. And although there were differences, an overlap did occur in the geographic and environmental features within sampled benthic communities. Pictured here on the left, in the top red box are 2 P-Xaniers egg cases, and several centimeters below that is an egg case of Abronius. And on occasion, these were observed within centimeters of each other. Observations such as these support the idea that egg cases of different species and of different genera can and do co-occur within close proximity. Further research concerning the use of structure-forming marine invertebrates as further research on the use of structure-forming marine invertebrates as oviparous nurseries for potential essential fish habitat designation and habitat-based management should be conducted for other oviparous elasmobranchs, and these are species such as sharks, skates, and rays. Oviparous nurseries are exceptionally susceptible to disturbances. They're found in highly productive areas, and their embryos develop rather slowly. This is between 1 to 2 years. Identifying the entire habitat for early life stages of oviparous elasmobranchs is necessary for conservation management, and this would include focusing on both ACASE as well as juvenile oviparous nurseries. Post-hatching, juvenile shark survival is incredibly important. This is more so true in the deep sea where there's a higher extinction risk. These sharks have a slow growth and late age to maturity, so being able to identify where these juvenile nurseries are would be the next valuable step. And although both of my study species have no documented declines, this study overall will help us better understand deep sea nurseries into specific oviposition site habitat characteristics. And with that, I would like to acknowledge my committee, Dr. Dave Ebert, Dr. Scott Hamilton, Dr. Ivano Aiello, and Dr. Joe Bizzarro. Dave, thank you for letting me into your lab. It's been really great these past several years. I got to work with you on my first publication. You've helped me so much in always making sure that I practice delivering talks and giving talks at each lab meeting to try and shake my habit of nervousness. And I'd like to think that eventually that all helped pay off, as I'm nervous now after my talk's finished. And I just really appreciate you always being available and providing wonderful feedback, no matter how busy you are. Dr. Scott Hamilton. Shamilton, I've known you the longest out of any. I met you as an undergraduate when I was working on an internship here with Dr. Kaye, and you have provided just really great feedback for my study. Some of my most enjoyable classes have been with you, and you're just overall have just been wonderful committee member and always give prompt feedback, always helpful, and just always been appreciative of you in the community. Ivano, I'll never forget how you used to always make fun of my smoothies that I brought into habitat mapping class, telling me how they looked like Alcorn Slough's sediment core samples, which they did. And then we ended up going out and taking sediment core samples within the slough and got stuck. And it does turn out that they did look like slough mud samples. It's because of your class actually this ended up incorporating this ACASE nursery identification. Eventually became my entire thesis as my initial thesis, and so I'd like to thank you in helping guide me towards this focus. And lastly, Joe Bizzarro. There's a lot I could say about you, but you already know how much invaluable feedback. I hate being emotional. You've provided for me. I've worked most closely with you, and you know the ins and outs of my project, and you've gotten to know me really well. I'm so proud to be the first student whose committee you've officially been on, and just thank you so much for everything that you've done. And sorry for being emotional. I really hate that. Moving on, further, I have many other people to acknowledge. Overall, ML faculty and staff, Moss Landing truly is such a unique place. you meet so many people, and everyone who works there is, so helpful and responsive and can make your life so much easier, from library to front office, everywhere. It's just such a wonderful place. I appreciate all of you so much. Kara Egg, I'm our graduate program coordinator. Just an amazing human, and thank you so much for helping anytime I was freaking out about some deadline that really, that much anxiety about. You're like, no, it's no big deal. Here, let me take care of it. Oh, it's okay. Crisis averted. You've done this for me countless times, and I just, many, many thanks to you. My Marine Ops family. Crap. Brian, JD, Kate, Jackson, Jenny. Thank you so much. I got the flowers at my apartment to go to a quieter place to deliver this talk. Working with you for the past several years, it's just been so important and special to me. Talking about gardening, to just getting to know each other on a personal level. Working for you guys, I drove a forklift. As fun and terrifying for that is for me, I probably should never do that again, even though I'm technically certified. I love you guys, and you will always be family to me. I'd like to thank my funding sources, the Myers Grant, as well as the Lowry Family Marine Science Outreach Scholarship, and Bari, the Video Annotation Reference System team. I could not have done anything, I could not have finished my project without you. Special shout out to Lonnie Lunston, who I've been working with for several years now. And I worked with him when I initially started, and he helped me with my first publication as well. It's just really been a pleasure to be getting to work with you and access all your data that has helped make this project here today what it is. And of course, Fisheries Science Center, Fisheries Ecology Division. Tom, thank you so much from when I was making sure to turn on the heater before I got to the little, to helping me with troubleshooting, the tape deck issues, helping me identify certain species. You've just been incredibly patient, and just I'm so appreciative of you. And Diana Waters, again, you've always been able to send me whatever data files that I need or miss, no matter how many times I'm like, oh crap, I actually needed, these transects as well. And, you were always very, quick to respond, and I hope I didn't bother you too much through that. And Mary Yakovlevich for allowing me to use these archive data to conduct my studies. My family have always been major supporters. Before I put this together, I didn't realize that both of these pictures are at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. But what else is one to do when your family comes from out of town and you've lived in that same area for about 12 years? My mom, my grandma, my dad, hello to you in Texas and everyone out there. Backs turned in this photo, but I really liked it. But especially my grandma Susan, I love you so much. You've been my greatest supporter through all of this, and thick and thin. I would not be here without you, and I love you so much, and I know that you know that. But many thanks and thank you, and this is for you. I would like to acknowledge the Pacific Shark Research Center. We've decided in 2014. I've had some wonderful experiences. One of my first being the thresher sharp necropsy, and I'm just like, hell yeah, this is, this is rad. I really love this lab. We've gotten to do so much public outreach, gone to conferences, networking with, all the important people that Dave knows and puts you in contact with who you need to know for what. And it's been a pleasure knowing and working with you all. And to know projects well and having you help me with mine. Where would I be without the 2014 cohort, Brohort, Holly, Cody, Matt, Alex, Laurel, Justin, Steve, and of course, Peng and Stephanie Schneider. Oh, wow, you guys. I couldn't have asked for a better cohort. There's so much I could say and so little that I can't say because I'm incredibly flustered right now. Just know I love you guys so much and I miss you. Getting to learn next to you and about your projects. I appreciate that so much, and I know this part, those of which have graduated and doing amazing things, and I'm excited to join the ranks. My first mate, Andy, where would I be without this little cat, my tiny stinker? He's been by my side this entire time. Although he can be kind of a pest, he is also just the weirdest but most comforting cat. He understands me on level creature does, and he's just been the greatest. Helped me through it all. Calvin Juan, my boyfriend. Sorry we don't take good pictures together. I love you so much. You've been a major help, especially these past several months, getting me through the finish line. Master of science yourself, you know what it takes, and you've definitely given me sage advice and helped me get over these final hurdles, and I appreciate that so much. My Monterey misfits, John, Katie, Kelly, and Kelly. My undergrad family, roommates who've seen me through it all, you know, CSUMB, and I was the one who stayed in the area for grad school. It was hard having you all move away, but knowing that we see each other often, we keep in close contact. You guys are always will be my family, and I'm so fortunate to have met you and to just have fallen into life situations with you. You guys are the best, and I love you so much. Justin Cordova, where are you? My freaking best friend, my trash dude. I'll never forget walking down halls in the lab, and everyone would always ask why we're so happy or why we're laughing, and just generally enjoying our time together. And just having you as just a close friend, as you've helped each other through so very. I can't wait till we finally get our trash dudes matching tattoo. Of course, have a dog quote, you know, it's not as easy being my friend, but I'll be there when you need me. No, you know that, and I love you. Lastly, be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Lindsay Cooper. We've seen a glimpse into the future, and now, you know, I'm just so happy to follow in your footsteps. A week later, we've pushed each other to the finish line. You're one of the kindest people I've ever met and one of my closest friends made in the Moss Landing community. Just days and nights working together and remotely after I moved away and see each other, just daily texts, positive affirmations, and just supporting each other. I love you so much, and yeah, I love you. and pull a Jeb Bush, please clap. Laughing, at least that makes me laugh. And with that, I guess I'll open it up for questions, but I'm not exactly sure how to do this. Okay.
If someone has a question, just raise your hand, and Amber, you can unmute them to ask the question.
I don't see any raised hand things. Participants new share. Would it be yeah. I don't know. Do I have to stop sharing my screen? Oh, there we go. Green share.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question, Amber?
Of course.
You're commenting on how the neonates and newborns, you're not looking for where there's a nursery area. Is there any evidence that they might migrate up into the midwater column to spend their time there?
From, I mean, so the sharks I was looking at with the Ambaria, and from what I read in the literature, no, I feel like they might be immigrating to deeper waters.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, it's a little outside the scope of what you looked at. I'm just curious if you had any feel from going through your data, any feel where they might go. You think they go to deeper water?
I would posit that they go to deeper waters, in part because the sharks, typically adult sharks don't frequent the more shallow water often, and they're Mbari does a pretty good job. Their database, they have surveys throughout the entire depth regions, and there weren't annotated in shallower waters.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Do you have any other questions for Amber?
If there are, I don't know if I'm just technologically inept.
No, I don't see any hands coming up.
I see a Scott Hamilton hand.
There we go.
Okay, wait. Hi, how's it going?
Good job. Thanks. Fantastic.
Thank you.
I had a question. Have there been observations of these cat shark eggs, I guess, in other locations along the coast? And do sort of the locations that you found them here, those sort of habitat associations, tend to, also occur, in other locations further north, or say, or further south, or something else going on?
Okay. So, so my study was obviously just constrained within the Monterey. Looking at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center, the Fisheries Resource Management, their ground fish annual projects, they have surveys done for decades now, and so upon looking at that data, they only have Aprosteris bronius egg cases identified and found the entire coast, the west coast, that is from Washington down to the Mexican coast. So there were no observations of foul-tail egg cases, and so this could be due to misidentification, I would say, potentially, but it also might be likely that there are more spread out or like smaller patches of brown cat shark egg cases.
And were those also mainly like those really steep kind of, the shelf break habitat? Was that also where they've been found in other locations?
Yes, in shallower waters, yes.
And then my other question was, you mentioned some of the associations with fishes. And so I was curious whether some of the other fishes that you found with the egg cases, whether any of the fishes are predators, or whether mainly it was just sort of incidental, they just sort of happened to be in the area at that time by the egg case.
It's hard to say. I believe mostly incidental, except probably not the lingcod. Eat a lot of things, and I believe that they've found a case within a lingcod stomach before, but there was no observations of mine that indicated that rockfishes were predatory.
I just want to, I have another question. I don't see anyone here, but let me just throw another one at you. Did you happen to come across any possible egg cases of the long-nosed cat shark, Aprosteris campi?
No, I did not. Okay. So I'm guessing that those occur deeper. I know Joe sent me a picture of one that I was thinking maybe was campi, but that was down Southern California bight, so completely out of the study region I was looking at.
And one other follow-on question, did you notice any skate egg cases at all?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Not near any cat shark egg cases, but throughout looking, yeah, I did. But okay, the skate egg cases were more so deeper and like rockier, like bouldery rock kind of wedged in there in the crevices.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, great. That's all I have.
Okay.
If we don't have any other questions, we can, I guess, thank everyone for being here. It was an outstanding presentation, Amber. I see a few claps out there.
I don't know. I can't tell if there's people asking questions. Oh wait, is
I
this?
see a few people clapping.
If that's clapping, that's not a raised hand. Okay.
Yeah, it's clapping. Yeah, I don't have any more questions. We'll meet as your committee and I will meet after. If no one has any more questions, we can go ahead and other people can go ahead and log out, and we'll go ahead and just have a few questions for you to finish up. And you're all done.
Okay. Well, with that, thank you all for coming to my thesis presentation. This is definitely not the way that anyone really pictured ending their time at Moss Landing virtually, but these are crazy times, and do what we got to do. I'm just happy that you're all able to tune in and join me. So thank you for your time.
Cool. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
How do I stop sharing my screen?